So what we want to do today is learn how to name ionic compounds from the formula units. So we're going to go from the actual chemical formula into a regular name, like a written name. And we're only going to do that today for the binary and ternary types without transition metals. There's another method for doing it with transition metals, but you need to understand how to do it first with non-transition metal ionic compounds before we can move forward with that. Real quick, what is a binary and ternary compound of ionic nature? Binary means that there are only two elements involved, two different elements, right? So for example, sodium chloride, sodium and chlorine. Calcium oxide, calcium and oxygen. Calcium chloride, calcium and chlorine. Now, just because we have two chlorines doesn't mean that we have more than two elements. We only have two elements. We have the calcium and chlorine. Just because we have two chlorines doesn't make it more than two different elements, right? So it's two different elements. All right, and then the last thing is for the ternary is we're going to have more than two different elements. This generally involves a polyatomic ion. So if you don't know what a polyatomic ion is, you should look up that or learn what those are. So for example, we have sodium hydroxide, NaOH. So we have both the sodium atom and the hydroxide polyatomic ion, which consists of hydrogen and oxygen. Calcium sulfate consists of the calcium atom and the sulfate polyatomic ion, which consists of sulfur and oxygen. And then the last one is, second to last one is iron cyanide. We have the iron atom, and then cyanide, the polyatomic ion of cyanide, which contains carbon and nitrogen, etc., etc. So a ternary has more than two different elements, and a binary has only two different elements. So how do we name a binary or ternary ionic compound? Well, there's 4 steps involved. The first step is to identify the cation and the anion in the chemical formula. And remember, for an ionic compound, it's also called the formula unit. Then what you're going to do is you're going to write the name of the cation, which is the positive ion. So you write the full name. And then you're going to write the name of the anion, the negative ion. So it's that simple. Write the positive ion first, the negative ion second. Now, there's a little bit of trick for the second ion, the anion. If it's a nonmetal atom, for example, nitrogen, sulfur, oxygen, you're going to drop the ending of the element name and then add the suffix "ide." For example, oxygen, you're going to drop the YGEN and write oxide. Fluorine, you're going to write fluoride. Phosphorus, phosphide. All right. So it just got to basically as you learn these, you will know how to write it. So all the halogens, fluorine, bromine, iodine, you're just going to replace the INE with the IDE. Right. The N's, the GENs, nitrogen, oxygen, you're going to write that as in nitride, oxide, carbide, stuff like that, right? As you get more practice on it, you will see what the names are, right? If it's a polyatomic ion, so we don't know what those are yet, or already know what those are, you're just simply going to write its name, right? So let's see how this works. So we have sodium chloride. So we take sodium, which is my cation. We write the full name, sodium. And then we have chlorine is my second atom, which is the anion. And then we're going to write chloride instead of chlorine. Magnesium chloride. We're going to write magnesium first. And remember, we write the chlorine. Instead of chlorine, we're going to write chloride. Now, just because it has two of them, we don't write the words bi or di or two. We just write magnesium chloride, right? And then the last example is one with a polyatomic ion. So that's sodium hydroxide. So here again, here's my metal atom, my cation, and then this is my polyatomic ion. So again, sodium, metal atom, cation, hydroxide, polyatomic anion. And that's how it is. It's nothing more complicated than that. Cation is written first in its full name, and then you write the anion. If it's a single atom, you're going to write it like "ide" or something like that. And then if it's a polyatomic ion, you're going to write the polyatomic ion's name. Okay, so let's try two together, and then you're going to do the rest of them by yourself. So let's look at our first one here. We're going to look at lithium and chlorine, right? So to write the name of that, we know we have our cation, which is lithium, and chlorine is our anion. So we write the cation's name first. It's lithium. And then we know that the chlorine here, it's not chlorine, it's going to be chloride. So we just write chloride. Okay? Now let's look at one with a polyatomic ion. Okay? So again, what is my cation? It's the sodium. Just because we have three of them, again, we don't write tri or triple or whatever. We just write the metal atom's name. So we're going to write sodium. And then notice that it has a polyatomic ion, PO4, which is phosphate. So we just write phosphate. That's a P. So that's phosphate. So sodium, phosphate. Sodium, phosphate. Okay, so what you're going to do now is you're going to try to name the rest of the 5 here on this piece of paper. So if you followed any of my videos before, I am going to ask you to stop the video. Then you're going to copy all the information down, work the problems out, and on the next slide I'll give you the answers. Now there is a small typo here. This 4 here should be a subscript, so it should be SO with a 4 down here. So this is the sulfate ion, right? So other than that, everything looks good. So there's a mixture of binary compounds and ternary compounds. Okay, so when you're ready, stop the video, write the information down, work the problems, and then restart to get the answers. So stop the video now. Okay, so here are the answers. You can check them by yourself. Hopefully you've got them all or most of them. If you struggle a little bit and still don't get it, you should ask me in class to do it with you in front of you so that you can understand how it works. But if you got these all right, then you're ready to move on to the next step, which is understanding how to write names with transition metals. So that's in another video.